organizations, but also faith-based groups, the Assembly of First Nations and other Aboriginal constituencies, international development organizations, youth groups, groups working on health, and a wide range of different constituencies from across the country representing millions of Canadians. We're here because we think the United States showed very good judgment by requesting a cumulative assessment of the impacts of the Keystone Pipeline. And we appreciated the due diligence that it did in doing so, and we were shocked to find that at least one of the reports that's being looked at quite actively that was commissioned in order to look into the issue came back and basically said, well, there are no cumulative impacts, which is, from our perspective, blatantly false. And you're hearing from a variety of different perspectives today about how the Keystone Pipeline, about the kinds of impacts that are associated with the tar sands. But there's no question in our mind that if you put another 1 million barrels a day of pipeline down in terms of capacity, the oil industry is going to rush to fill it as fast as it can. Not all is tragic in Canada in terms of the climate change file. There is political leadership from some corners. In British Columbia, the province of British Columbia has adopted a carbon fee that basically puts a price on carbon more or less consistent with Europe. In Ontario, the province has adopted policies for promoting renewable energy that is probably among the best in North America. And in the province of Quebec, there are the Quebec government has targets that are about as ambitious as any targets in the world in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. But those pockets of political leadership do not apply to the province of Alberta or to the current federal government of Canada. If Alberta were a country, it would have the largest per capita greenhouse gas emissions on planet Earth. Alberta is the only industrialized country in the world. Is the only jurisdiction in the industrialized world, as far as I know, that has a plan has a climate change plan, and that plan is to increase emissions. The Alberta government's climate change plan between now and the year 2020 is to increase emissions by 20% over 2005 levels, and even stretching out to the year 2050, when industrialized countries are supposed to be taking action to largely phase out greenhouse gas emissions. Alberta's plan is to barely get below 2005 levels. So this is a purely reckless approach to the question of climate change that is being driven by the overwhelming dominance of the oil industry within Alberta. And unfortunately, at a federal level, the situation isn't much brighter. Not only has the federal government made a series of empty promises in terms of its willingness to take action on climate change that has totally failed to live up to, but it continues to try to put a good face onto what is a very bad situation. And its policy could best be summed up as doing as little as possible when it comes to this particular issue. And the relationship between the Keystone Pipeline and the tar sands and Canada's federal policy is clear that between now and 2020, 90% of the expected growth in Canada's greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to the tar sands. So if you project forward, the rest of Canada could basically disappear. And if the tar sands proceeds as it's currently projected to proceed, it would be impossible for Canada to achieve science-based greenhouse gas reduction targets, even if the rest of the country went to zero. So Canada's got a choice to make. And these kinds of projects, the Keystone Project, is having a huge impact on the way in which we're going to make those choices. And so we're here to appeal to the people that are making the assessment regarding the environmental impact statement and the supplemental assessment, to appeal to them to recognize that there are implications for the Keystone Pipeline. There are cumulative and transboundary implications associated with greenhouse gas emissions, and to ensure that that process gets looked at well, and to pause the process until such time that a more robust analysis can be completed.
Hi, I'm Gillian McEachran with Environmental Defence Canada. As my colleagues have already done, I'm also here to urge you to not rush forward with approving Keystone XL. If approved, the need to fill that extra pipeline capacity would drive tar sands expansion. And already, what we've seen is that the desire to expand tar sands is really the driving force in Canada's climate and energy policy. We have a new federal majority government in Canada, which will begin sitting next week. And despite claims that the tar sands are being well regulated and the impacts are being reduced, that's simply not the case. Currently, there are no actual limits on water and air pollution or carbon pollution resulting from the tar sands industry. And as the industry expands, these problems get worse and worse.